Okay, welcome to our last notes of Unit 1, which is Unit 1 Notes 5, Writing Inequalities. So now we're going to take what we did in our last notes with the graphing of inequalities, and we're going to apply them to word problems. We're going to really focus on how we can be using this in real life. So let's talk about these symbols because I think that they are really, really important to understand. Because remember when I told you about that column, that it tells us how we can use them in the So when we're talking about less than symbols, we're talking about looking for words like not as much as or fewer than. When we're talking about greater than, the greater than symbol, we're talking about anything meaning more than. When we're talking about less than or equal to, we're looking for words like at most or no more than. This one is used a lot if you have a certain amount of money that you can spend. You can spend no more than that money, but you could spend less than that money. Greater than or equal to is used a lot when we're talking about fundraising, if we want to make a certain amount of money. So no less than or at least are the words we want to look for that. So remember when we're talking about inequalities with two variables, you wrote this down yesterday, so we're still graphing them to get the solution. We're still giving a shaded options. And we'll look at more about what that graph means in terms of the problem once we start doing word problems. So a lot of what we're doing today is very similar than yesterday. We just have to use the word problems to set up the inequality that we want to use. So let's start this off. So Hannah budgets $30 a month on lunch. On most days, she brings her lunch. She can also buy lunch at the cafeteria or at a fast food restaurant. Okay. She spends on average of $3 for lunch at the cafeteria and an average of $6 at lunch for the restaurant. How many times a month can Hannah buy her lunch and remain within budget? Okay, so let's let X represent the number of days she buys lunch at the cafeteria. Let's let Y represent the number of days she buys lunch at the restaurant. So we know that she only has enough money to spend $30 at lunch. So we can spend at most $30, which means we have that less than or equal to. We know that. So here's our graph when we're ready for it. Okay. So we know we can spend at most $30. So for every X lunch that I buy at the cafeteria, I am spending $3. For every Y days I'm buying lunch at the restaurant, I'm spending $6. So I just set up that equation. It's just like what I had you guys practice when you put things in standard form on Unit 1, Notes 3. Now, we know very well by now that we cannot graph this unless it's solved for Y. So I'm going to take this equation and I'm going to solve it for Y. I get a lot of students that ask, does it matter which way you write them? The answer is no. The biggest thing is that you label your axes, which is what we're going to do in a second once we finish solving these. So to get Y by itself, I'm going to subtract 3X from both sides. And then I get 6Y is less than or equal to negative 3X plus 30. And last but not least, I'm going to divide both sides by 6. Y is less than or equal to, well, negative 3 divided by 6 is negative 1 over 2x. 30 divided by 6 is 5. So this right here is the inequality that I want to graph. So remember, we let X represent the number of days she buys lunch at the cafeteria. So I want people to know that that's my X-axis. And then Y is the number of days she buys lunch at the restaurant. That's my Y-axis. So let's go ahead and graph this line. My Y-intercept is at 5. So I'm crossing the Y-axis at 5. Then my slope is negative 1 over 2. So I'm going down 1 over 2. Then look at my symbol. I have less than or equal to. There's a solid line underneath. This means that I'm going to have a solid line. Then the alligator's not eating the Y. It's facing away. It's less than. So I'm shading underneath. So that little corner right there represents my solutions. And you'll notice a lot with these type of problems that we're only focusing in the first quadrant. Negative time, negative amounts of lunch doesn't make sense. So we want to keep everything positive, which is what we're doing here. So if you notice right here is our solution. So what does this mean? Well, we could spend all of our $30 by buying 5 lunches at a restaurant. Or we could buy two. We could buy 2 lunches in the cafeteria. We could buy 2 lunches in the cafeteria and 1 lunch at the restaurant. We could buy 2 lunches at the cafeteria and 2 lunches or 3 lunches at a restaurant. Or we could even buy up to 4 at a restaurant. So all of these points in here represent different ways we can spend that $30. So just take a second, write out a couple different ways she could spend that $30 based on the solutions that are shaded in there. All right, let's take a second and talk about Rose Padilla. Okay, so take a second, pause the video, read through this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, we're going to let X represent the 30-second commercials. Y is going to represent the 60-second or 1-minute commercials. All right, then we're going to write an open sentence representing the situation. Okay, well, we're told that we have 15 minutes available for commercials. You know it's confusing using minutes and seconds. We don't want to use both. We want to use one or the other. Well, we already have 30-second commercials or 1 minute. We already have those in terms of commercials. Okay, or sorry, in terms of seconds. So let's take 15 seconds or 15 minutes and put it in terms of seconds. So for 15 minutes, we need to multiply that times 60 seconds to figure out how many seconds are in 15 minutes. So then we get that there's 900 seconds in 15 minutes. All right, so let's continue working. So since X is the number of 30-second commercials, for every X 30-second commercial that goes by, we have 30 seconds of advertising. It makes sense. For every Y 60-second commercial that goes by, we have 60 seconds of commercials. That makes sense. Now we can have at most 900 seconds of advertising. If we do more, people might get angry at us. They might stop listening to our radio station. So at most is represented by less than or equal to. So now I need to solve this for X. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to subtract 30X from both sides. That's hard to see. Then what we're going to do next is I want to get rid of that 60Y. So I'm going to divide both sides by 60. We're going to keep that Y as less than or equal to negative 30 divided by 60 is going to give us a negative 1/2 X plus 900 divided by 60 is 8. So now we have it in slope-intercept form. Remember, that's the easiest way to graph things. We're crossing the y-axis at 8. And from there, I'm going down 1 over 2. Down 1 over 2. I have a solid line underneath my inequality. So I have a solid line graphing, and then it's less than. Okay, the alligator isn't eating the y, so I need to shade it down. And so I'm shading in that region. So go ahead and pull out a couple options for Rosa. Okay, so if she sells 4 30-second commercials, she can do up to 6 60-second commercials. Okay, so look, pull out some options for her that exist. So all it really is points within these shaded regions. These random points are all options Rosa has for selling under 90 seconds of commercial or 900 seconds of commercials. Okay, so let's set this one up together. Then I want you guys to go ahead and graph it. Lee Cooper writes and edits short articles for local newspaper. It takes her about an hour to write an article and about a half an hour to edit an article. If Lee works up to 8 hours a day, how many articles can she write and edit in one day? All right, so again, hours, minutes, it's all confusing. Well, half an hour, if I put things all in terms of an hour, I can still do that. I just have to have 1/2. Okay? So let's write this out. So I'm going to let X represent me writing an article. I'm going to let Y represent editing an article. So for every X article that I write, it takes me 1 hour. For every Y article that I edit, it takes me a half an hour. I have 8 hours. I can work up to 8 hours. I can't work 8.3 hours. I can't work past 8 hours. I can work at most 8 hours. So that's going to give me less than or equal to 8. So we need to solve this for y to graph it. So I'm going to subtract 1x from both sides. Now when I have 1/2 y, that's when I need to multiply everything by 2 in order to get rid of it. So all of these are going to be multiplied by 2. So I'm going to get y is less than or equal to 2x, negative 2x, sorry, plus 8. So what I want you to do right now is go ahead and graph this situation for me. Okay, graph that. Then I want you to pause the video and I want you to actually do this one yourself. See if you can write it out. Note that y represents the pitcher of pop and x represents the large pizza. So go ahead and set that up and graph it on your own. Let's practice some graphing ourselves. Okay, so this is crossing the y-axis at 1. And then we're going down 2 over 3. I look, there's a line underneath my inequality, which means I have a solid line. And then I have a less than sign. The alligator is facing away from the y, so I need to shade down. So I'm shading in there. Okay, let's take a look at number 6. So number 6, in order for us to solve that, we have to graph it. We have to solve it for y. So subtract 3x from both sides. Then you get negative 5y is greater than negative 3x plus 15. Divide both sides by negative 5. And then because I'm dividing by a negative, I'm flipping my sign. Negative 3 over negative 5 is positive 3/5 x. 15 divided by negative 5 is negative 3. So now I'm going to go ahead and graph that. I'm going down 3, and then I'm going up 3 over 5. I notice that I don't have a line underneath my graph, so it's going to be dashed. The alligator's facing away from my y, so I'm going to go down from my line, and then I'm going to shade that in. Okay, so last but not least, I want you guys to take a second and graph these 2 lines for me. These last 2 lines. So just for practice, graph those 2 lines right there. Once you're done, you can go ahead and take the quiz from this video.